advocate for Let Them Breathe. You and I were talking about these districts. Many superintendents across the state have been stating, well, since the state is not enforcing the mask requirements, well, why should we? And briefly, tell us what your thoughts are and some conversations you've had recently with county officials and even school officials.
Yeah, I actually have some shocking news to report. Actually, a couple days ago at the Cajon Valley stakeholders meeting, Superintendent David Miyashiro, and he is a rock star, by the way. He was one of the brave ones who reopened schools here in San Diego County in the Cajon Valley before anybody else did, and did so safely. But here's what he said, which made me very, very concerned. Apparently, he had a conversation with Dr. Wilma Wooten. And Dr. Wilma Wooten said that if a school district does not comply with the mask mandates from the state of California, then the state is going to cut off funding from school districts. They are going to sue school districts, and they will actually close down schools for not complying with the masks.
And you did mention that Alpine Union was included in that conversation. KUSI News, we spoke with Superintendent Rich Newman last week, and he is saying, well, since the schools are able to decide how they're going to enforce mask mandates, he's requiring staff to wear masks, but it will be optional for students. And what did you hear about Alpine Union in that meeting?
Right. So during that same stakeholders meeting for Cajon Valley on Monday, it was actually stated that Alpine was asked to walk back their statement that they would make mask a choice for their kids. So we're very anxious to hear from Alpine to see what they're going to do. We're hoping that Alpine is going to be brave and stand up against the state for our kids, because that's what we're doing. We're here for the best health and safety of our kids.
All right, Amy. Well, I'm going to look up that file recording from Cajon Valley School District to see, what he heard from Dr. Wilma Wooten. Thank you so much for joining us on KUSI.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. All right, I'm going to send it back to you, Ginger. We're here live in Carlsbad at Sage Creek Elementary. So the biggest question is, moving forward, how are the districts going to handle if students are not going to comply with the mask requirements?
Yeah, that enforcement question, that's going to be interesting as soon as that gets answered. And certainly sounds like if that action that woman was just telling you about from Wilma Wooten and the state, if they actually take that, well, then they're not actually allowing the enforcement to be up to the districts and individual schools. So once again, California making it abundantly confusing. All right, Teresa, we'll check in with you next hour.
A lot of pressure on the districts.
Yeah, thank you.
Last year was a very difficult year. There were a lot of changes, and of course the kids are wearing masks. So as you can imagine, teaching kindergarten, you have to see their face. You have to know how they're sounding out a word, or if they're sounding out a word. I can't see any of that when kids have a mask on. I'm worried about their social and emotional well-being, and I'm here to ask the board to consider a resolution that we have mask choice for staff, for parents, and for children.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Lisa. And I'm also going to call in Scott Davidson. He is one of the attorneys with Let Them Breathe. Thanks so much for joining us on KUSI. You're also a parent. Why is it so important for you to take on this complaint with Let Them Breathe?
Well, absolutely. Thanks, Teresa. So, what we've seen last year is how devastating school closures were to kids and how hard it was for them to be home. And then we saw towards the end of the year that they got to go back to school, but it wasn't the same. That they felt like they were in these clean rooms. They felt like they couldn't socialize, that they weren't allowed to touch each other or talk to each other. And the biggest factor there was masks. And so as we started to see, the safety of other schools throughout the country, we noticed that there was plenty of data showing that they didn't really need to be wearing masks. These kids are not transmitters of the virus, that they don't get very sick, and that there's no reason for them to be wearing masks in school. And so we decided that, we should advocate to the state to try and get rid of the mask requirement. We've, been working with them all summer and trying to get them to get rid of it, but they decided to go ahead and mandate it anyway. Even if you've been vaccinated, you still have to wear a mask, which makes no sense. So once again, just like with the lawsuit that we filed to reopen schools, we knew that we had to file a lawsuit, that's apparently the only way the state is going to listen to science is if we get a judge to look at all the facts and look at all the data and weigh it and decide whether or not these mask requirements really need to be in place. And so that's what we're hoping to achieve with the lawsuit.
Well, this is a state mask mandate for K through 12, and I know we have been discussing the section code 48900. So the schools can enforce how they're going to handle the mask requirements, and if students are not going to comply, they could face penalties and consequences. How is all that going to play out, and how do you, I want your reaction to that.
Yeah, we can't wait. We can't wait to see, because we've already seen school boards say, if there's no requirement, if we have to, if the mask is a requirement, the mask rule is a requirement, but there's no enforcement provision, what does that mean? Does that mean that we just remind kids that they should wear a mask, but then we don't have to necessarily, kick them out of class or constantly pester them if their mask come off or they decide they don't want to wear a mask? So we don't know what that means. That's a great legal question, and we're hoping that these school districts will figure that out and will decide for themselves, do we really need to require that all these kids have to wear a mask every day? And if they don't wear a mask every day, are we going to kick them out of class and send them to some special program or discipline them in some way? And so we're really hoping that the school districts will provide a lot more flexibility for these kids that really, can't wear a mask, or if they just, are having trouble wearing the mask that day, that they get some flexibility with the enforcement, and that it's not something that's as rigid as it was last year. Maybe we could consider it like, wearing a hat or chewing gum or something to that effect. And they, just kind of remind them to wear a mask, but give them a little bit more flexibility in terms of whether or not they really have to do it every day. So we're going to wait and see. We're advocating to all these school boards here in Carlsbad throughout the state to let them, know that they have flexibility and enforcement, that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to ramp up to, expulsion or suspension or some type of really heavy discipline, that it can just be, a simple reminder, or it can just be something that's more hands-off.
Okay, and has this complaint been filed against the state?
Not yet. So we think this week, just took a look at it today, and we're finalizing it now. So any day now, we should have it on file, and then we'll see when our hearing date comes.
All right, Scott Davison, thanks so much for joining us on KUSI, and thanks to these kiddos from Cal Elementary for joining us as well. But we're here live at Sage Creek High School in Carlsbad, and one of the series of rallies for a mask choice, and that big group that you saw of rallying, they're inside the board meeting. Again, mask requirements not even on the agenda, but they're allowing public comment. I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not hearing from these folks that they are demanding nobody wear a mask. They're saying, hey, if you... All right, Teresa, we'll check in with you at 10 o'clock. Thank you.